This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 799, recorded on Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. How to Grow Young. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we are going to fill your heads with bats, bacteria, and an interview. But first, thanks to the Burroughs Welcome Fund and our Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. Change! From before we are born until after we are dead, life is an unending series of changes. Sometimes we see change as a breath of fresh air, the liberation of the oppressed, the reuniting of lovers, the legalization of a recreational libation, a long-awaited vaccination, a free and fair election. All of these things seem like good change to us. Sometimes change looks ominous, bad even. The sudden oppression of people, the unexpected separation of loved ones from each other, the polarization of political rhetoric, a pandemic, and at times, even a free and fair election can seem like bad change. There is one form of change that affects all others: science. Science is changing the way we live every day, changing the outcomes of illness, accidents, natural disasters, changing the way we connect, interact, and understand the world. Changing what is possible, what is actually known, and what can be imagined next. That is constantly changing the change that we encounter. In fact, the only thing that's not been changing is This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We're back again to talk about all the science. And there was some, hopefully everyone's feeling as light and, like in dancing on your tiptoes, not crushing the flowers anymore under your feet. Yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling like this is a good week for science. I brought a whole bunch of stories about space bacteria, brains, aging, and we are going to be talking with our guest, Marta Zaraska, about growing young, about aging, and how we can do it a little bit better in just a little bit. Justin, what did you bring for the show?
I've got global climate change, how that's going to be getting wetter. A paleontologist was studying sharks and made a pterosaur discovery, and a kind of interesting insight to the religiosity of Trump supporters.
Very interesting. All right, Blair, what is in the animal corner?
Oh my goodness. I have bats wearing masks. I have oil-eating worms. I have touchy fish and mean mongooses.
Mean mongooses? How about friendly mongooses?
Never.
Ricky
Never
Tikki
trust
Tavi
a
was
weasel.
a friend to all. I can't wait to dig into all of these stories and even more. But as we jump in, I want to remind everyone that if you have not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, you can find us on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. Look for This Week in Science. We are TWIS Science, TWISCIENCE on the Twitch channel. You can find us also all places that podcasts are found: Podcast, Stitcher, Spreaker, Pandora, Radio.com, TuneIn, Google, Apple. Just, again, This Week in Science, head to twis.org, which is our website.
And there's a special prize if you can figure out which one of those is not real.
I don't think I made any of them up. I might have.
Sure. I always feel like things can't all be real names of things.
People make up some of the craziest names. I mean, pharmaceuticals are an example of that. Anyway, let's talk about the science. Okay, so quick stories. Let's dive in. First story. What would it be like if our moon glowed? Could you imagine if our moon glowed in the dark at night?
Like
Doesn't
of
it
its
already?
own, but like out of its own
Of its own accord,
not just
just
reflecting the light of others.
Yeah. All
not
right.
not acting like a mirror, but acting more like like one of those glowing stars that you charge up with light during the day, and then you watch them at night on your ceiling where you've placed them when they glow
So
at night.
always
It would just be
a
like
full
the sun,
moon,
but dimmer.
but not
is basically
quite
what you're describing.
light dark thing as it did because you could always see the whole circumference of it.
Right, you could always see the whole moon. Well, researchers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California were looking at Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. And Jupiter has this amazing magnetic field. It also has a lot of radiation that it, as a planet, releases. And that radiation impacts the moons around it. Now, Europa is very icy, and the researchers went, some of those icy compounds are probably pretty salty too. And so let's take a look at what this would look like. What would it look like to the naked eye? How would it look? And so they were like, okay, I think it's going to look this particular way, that, one salty compound will glow a little blue. This other compound might glow a little green. And we can't actually go there and look at it yet. There is a mission heading out there in the next couple of years to be able to go check it out and see what it does look like and whether or not it does glow in the dark. But their work took advantage of a device that they call IceHeart. And IceHeart is otherwise known as Ice Chamber for Europa's High-Energy Electron and Radiation Environment Testing. They took IceHeart to a high-energy electron beam facility and subjected it to a high-energy electron beam. And what they found is that the glow tied to different ice compositions. It wasn't just one glow that was the same for everything. They saw that sodium chloride was significantly lower in its glowiness than other salts that they were looking at. And so they looked at it and they were like, this is weird. This doesn't look the way that it's supposed to. This is cool. And so it gave them a little aha moment about how Europa might actually look. But if Europa were not under radiation, it would probably just look like our moon, dark in the dark and reflecting light in the light. But it may, in fact, have a crazy glow to it, which would be very exciting. So hopefully the upcoming Europa Clipper will be able to take a look at it, and when they get there, be able to determine if they're right based on this simulation in the laboratory. Glow moons would be great.
Wild,
I know. I mean, I could put a glow moon on my ceiling, but I didn't expect one around Jupiter.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about some cool bacteria?
Yeah, I sure can. So we've discussed many times the fact that there are certain bacterias that we know potentially could eat oil or plastics. The exact application of those are still kind of under question, which is where this study comes in. So this is from the Bio-Nanotechnology Lab of Kazan Federal University, which is in Russia. And they wanted to find a way to deliver oil-consuming bacteria straight into soil to remove oil from the soil. And they found that they could potentially use nematodes, worms, as public transit for the marine bacteria so that they could kind of deliver them to the soil through the worms. This is Caenorhabditis elegans is the nematode.
C. elegans.
Yes. And yes, thank you. The much easier way to say it.
Yeah.
And the bacteria in question was Alcanivirax borcumensis.
Nailed it.
The nematodes actually eat bacteria as part of their diet. So they first checked to make sure that the nematodes could survive eating the bacteria, and it was no problem. And then they also found that the undigested bacteria in the nematodes changed the gut microflora of the worms. Makes sense. It is their microflora, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that actually led to enhanced digestion of oil in the nematode and left their body through natural ways. They were able to just poop out the leftovers of this oil. And they found that worms themselves can eat oil products if they're not fed other things with the aid of this bacteria as well. They saw that the oil dissipates into small particles of 5 to 6 micrometers, and that's inside the worm's guts, and then the bacteria can take over and break them down further. They don't know which components other types of oils would produce when digested by nematodes, but so far it looks pretty good. They also think that this might be able to be used to deliver bacteria to water tables to be able to get rid of oil from water through some oil-eating bacteria via worms. But then you'd have worms in the water. So I don't know. I don't know at what point that would become a problem, but problem one, the oil could potentially be solved this way.
Unless it's the worms in the soil and the soil gets close enough to the water. It's infused with the water, and then the bacteria it's just all part of that mushy underground ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the idea of using nature to, I mean, if these nematodes eat bacteria to begin with, and they're just using the nematodes to move bacteria from one place to another, to introduce them to a place where they're needed. I don't know. It seems like if the nematodes are going to be there anyway, this seems like a smart plan. I mean, we're doing interesting things in nanotechnology, doping little molecules, gold ions and atoms with antibodies so that we can use them to attack cancer tumors, and we're like sending these things in our bodies are little ecosystems, right? So it's a similar kind of concept. Use things to shuttle things around. And this is it seems like a very natural system. I like
it reminded me of the study we talked about a while back using sperm to deliver drugs.
Yes.
Yeah. Take something biotic that could make your delivery instead of abiotic. Yeah.
Moving on to my next story. I have another bacteria story. This one is about bacteria in space. So we talked earlier this year, back in August, about some bacteria that had spent a long period of time in space on the outside of the International Space Station. Now, researchers have done a deeper dive on some of these bacteria called Deinococcus radiodurans, and Deinococcus radiodurans are an extremophile species of bacteria who were found, who are known to be able to handle high amounts of radiation. Now, the last study that was done, they discovered that there were, in comparison to E. coli bacteria, the radiodurans were able to chop up their DNA, their chromosomes, and be able to remix them and put them together in a way that seemed as if they were totally fine and had never been affected by radiation previously. In this study, the bacterial cells were dehydrated, shipped to the International Space Station, and then they were placed in what's called the exposed facility. The exposed facility is a platform that is continually exposed to space, and they were behind a glass window that blocked out UV light and at wavelengths less than 200 nanometers, which is the amount of radiation that does start to damage the radiodurans in a negative manner. So, and it's also the amount of radiation that would be blocked out by carbon dioxide in Mars's atmosphere. More on that in a moment. Anyway, they looked at these bacteria when they were brought back to Earth, and they discovered that they have some really interesting physical characteristics that are very different from the control group of bacteria that were left here on Earth and exposed to UV light in a similar manner. The bacteria that came back from low Earth orbit have little nodules all around their outside. They are vesiculated, which means that they have gotten rid of a bunch of compounds inside the bacteria that were negatively affecting them and causing metabolic stress. They created vesicles to expel and store these metabolites on their exterior. And the regular bacteria, the bacteria that were in the control group, did not. So the bacteria came back really lumpy compared to those that stayed here on Earth, but they were still alive. Big caveat, however, a lot of them did die. In fact, a very large majority of these bacteria actually died. And in looking at the difference between the survival rate of the control bacteria to these space bacteria, they really didn't do very well. They only about 5% or so survived. Between 5 and 10% actually survived. So space, it does kill the bacteria. A number of them do survive. They have really interesting characteristics which allow them to survive. The highlight of this is that we should really be thinking about what we are doing to sterilize spacecraft that we send to other planets like Mars, where these bacteria could potentially be surviving when the craft reach the surface.
Well, whenever we've talked about this kind of stuff, I always think about what this means for panspermia, both for the start of our planet, but also whenever anything breaks off of Earth.
Yeah.
Has this happened before? Have we seeded other planets in the past? It's, and I think this helps kind of put a stop to my wild musings about that a little bit, just because at least here it seems like, at least for this type of bacteria, there would be clear kind of indicators of the fact that they came from space, potentially, right? They'd have these weird lumps on them or something. So maybe this is a good start of a way to kind of look for the signs of bacteria that's been in space. Maybe there's kind of a smoking gun that we can find.
Were you recently in space?
Yeah.
Are you covered in vesicles on your external layers?
Uh-oh, you're all bumpy.
You're bumpy. You've been to space. Yeah.
Would you tell me?
Okay, Blair. Justin has dropped off again, so tell me about those wrinkle-faced bats.
Wrinkled-faced bats. Okay, so wrinkled-faced bats are this crazy bat. Their face is all wrinkly. I put a picture in the show notes, Kiki, if you can find it in like the notes section. So the wrinkled-faced bats, they look wild without the fact that they have this fleshy extra skin under their chin that they can pull over their face like a mask. So they're COVID prepared. How's that for bats and COVID? The skin mask is only developed by males. They think that all these little folds on their face are actually for air movement for whatever reason. But so they have this flap that goes up on their face. And they have not been observed really doing much of anything in the wild because, as one of the lead researchers from this study says, they're small, they're nocturnal, and they fly. So it is not easy to study. So this is the first time they've been able to record vocalizations, mating behavior. They used ultrasonic sensors. They used infrared cameras. They're able to see what mating behavior looked like in these wrinkle-faced bats. And they found that they actually pull those masks down before they mate. Why? We don't know.
To show their potential mate their real face. This is who I really am.
So this is why it's weird, though, is they form leks, which basically means all the males gather up in a big space and the women get to go, that one. So when they do that, they still have the mask on. They don't pull the mask down until copulation begins. So,
lesson for everybody in this day and age, I think.
What? Keep your mask on
keep
until
your mask on
inside with your significant other. Yeah. So the footage of courtship showed males emit loud, low-frequency whistling calls when the females came to mate. When selected by a female, males pulled down their mask-like skin flaps prior to mating. They only pulled the flaps back when they were done with copulation. So again, why? But it's a
Amazing.
wild behavior that's been documented. So the other thing the lead researcher said is there are many questions. That is the beauty with this species. When you found it, many questions arise. So lots to be learned about the wrinkle-faced bats.
I think their wrinkly face is pretty cute, actually.
Yikes. I was looking at them and I was like, an up close of these might be really good for the Animal Corner calendar for next year, for 2022.
Ooh.
Might be pretty wild.
I think that would be fun. Wrinkly thing. No, never mind. Not going there. Okay. Nope. Justin.
All right, I'm going to go quick just because I'm not sure I'm going to have but a few moments of internet in between getting kicked off. Global climate change is causing hurricanes that make landfall to take more time to weaken. Reports a study published in the journal Nature. Studies have shown that global climate change will intensify hurricanes. We kind of knew this already. We're going to get more of them. They're going to be stronger. But this is the first study to specifically look at hurricanes that have made landfall. Hurricanes that develop over warmer ocean waters carry more moisture and therefore stay stronger for longer after hitting land. In the future, as the world continues to warm, hurricanes are more likely then to last longer, reach communities further inland, and be more destructive.
Great.
Yeah, so this all comes down to hurricanes having fuel. The fuel of a hurricane is moisture. As the moisture moves up through the hurricane, it releases heat that was collected in the sea surface temperature, and that turns into wind energy, which then propels it to go faster. The scientists analyzed North Atlantic hurricanes that made landfall over the past half century. They found that during the course of the first day after landfall, hurricanes weakened almost twice as slowly under today's conditions than they did 50 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are they wetter and hotter? Is that what's going on?
Well, the heat itself, the heat is coming from the surface of the water, which is also allowing more moisture to get up into the hurricane. But that heat then turns into actual wind power. This is Quotey Voice quoting Lynn Lee, who's the first author, PhD student at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology of Fluid Mechanics. In the fluid mechanics unit, when we plotted the data, we could clearly see that the amount of time it took for a hurricane to weaken was increasing with the years. But it wasn't a straight line. It was undulating. And we found that these ups and downs matched the same ups and downs we see in sea surface temperature. Hurricanes are heat engines. Just like the engines in cars, fuel is combusted, and that heat energy is converted into mechanical work. For hurricanes, the moisture is taken up from the surface of the ocean is the fuel, then that intensifies and sustains a hurricane's destructive power, with heat energy from the moisture converted into powerful winds. Making landfall is equivalent to stopping the fuel supply to the engine of the car. Without fuel, the car will decelerate. Without its moisture source, hurricane will decay. And that's the problem. There's more moisture stock, if you will, in these new modern day hurricanes, which allows them to persist and destruct and flood stuff longer than they did in the only times. Oh, look, and you have graphics up there. Yes. Yep. Those. Oh, and they relate to the story. That's even better.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can see it's getting stronger, faster, longer, worse.
So, I mean, that's the thing about climate change and extreme weather events, right? Is it doesn't create hurricanes. It makes them more frequent and more intense.
Well, technically, it can create more hurricanes. So it doesn't
more frequent, right? So
it doesn't create more cyclones or the tropical storms. It doesn't create more tropical storms necessarily, but it gives those tropical storms that usually would die out
a little more boost.
Energy to keep going. And then as they move up, they can even hit warmer waters, which gives them the fuel boost to go full hurricane.
No, that's what I'm saying. We're not likely to get a hurricane in California. But that's more what I mean, is that they're happening more frequently and more intensely.
That's bad change. We don't want that. A good change.
Good change. That's what I want. I like good change.
Okay, this is a good change. There's a paleontologist who was studying 100-year-old shark fossil collection and discovered a new species of pterosaur. University of Portsmouth PhD student Roy Smith discovered the mystery creature amongst fossil collections housed in the Sedgwick Museum of Cambridge and the Booth Museum at Brighton. This collection was assembled between 1850 and 1900 from phosphate miners in and around England. And they would find these small fossil fragments, and they would get a little extra money by turning them over to the university folk. So, but these things have been like the story that we have so often that comes up on the show. It's been in the collection for 120, 170 years. These fossils have been sitting in a box somewhere. They at one point did get sorted, and all of the shark spines that they found went into this one bucket. However, it was these shark spines that were being observed and reanalyzed, I guess, and it turned out they weren't, although similar looking to a shark fin spine, they had these, well, according to Smith, one such feature they had was a tiny little holes where nerves come to the surface and are used for sensitive feeding by the pterosaurs. Shark fin spines do not have these, but the early paleontologists clearly missed these features. Two of the specimens discovered can be identified as a specific pterosaur, but one additional specimen is clearly distinct and represents a potential new species. It's a paleontological mystery now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So he's waiting now. He says he's waiting for the COVID restrictions to be lifted so he can go to other museums and check through their old collections around this time from these, because these are, you know, when you're dealing with 150
to look for other misclassifications, right?
These sites have been overmined. There's not always great detail about where they were even found, which mine they came from, what year they might have even been found. They just sort of found their way into the collections. But even though he's looked through the collections he has access to and found only what he can, this small segment of specimens for this species, he knows that there's other collections out there. And so once they can go and meet face to face with other people and talk, and I guess they're in a bigger shutdown than most places right now.
Yeah, at this point. Now. Yeah. Yeah. I have something that kind of falls into that. The idea of things that had been thought to just have one function, but are still around, and then under a little bit of digging, discover that they have another function. Researchers publishing in the journal Nature Immunology from the University of Bonn in Germany have discovered a gene called CRELD1, CRELD1. It's either a gene or something out of, like, I don't know, a name for an orc or something. I don't know.
I am Kreld.
Kreld1. I am the Kreld1. Kreld1 is involved in the development period of the heart in the embryo, during the embryonic stages, but it sticks around after birth. Nobody really knew what it was doing. It's around in just about every cell in the body, and its purpose was unknown. However, researchers decided they were going to look into this, and so they used transcriptome analysis to look at the transcripts, things that were being transcribed and proteins that were being created. What they were able to discover is that out of 4,500 test subjects, they were able to determine that CRELD1 is involved in the immune system. It's very important for the immune system, actually. They found that people who have low levels of CRELD1 have very few T cells. They don't have a lot of T cells, and T cells are really important for fighting off invasive agents in our bodies, a huge part of our immune system. And so they're going to try and figure out a little bit more about that. But they, through mouse experiments, discovered that if they cut out CRELD1, then it completely led to a lack of T cells. The T cells were not able to continue propagating within the mice when CRELD was deleted. And so they die earlier, and then there's nothing left to protect. The researchers said, we see similar changes in people with an aged immune system as well. It's also thought that people who have immunodeficiencies and as they age, deteriorated diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's disease may be may have something wrong with their CRELD1 activity. So CRELD1, who knew? Used to just be involved with the heart, but now it has to do with keeping your immune system from getting old. The researchers have now discovered the link between CRELD1 and the immune system. Causative, correlational. Is it affected by things, or is it something that is the cause of these things? This is not yet known. So there is much more work to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, everyone, if you are watching TWIS right now, we have calendars. Head over to twis.org to click on the Froggy Toad link and purchase Blair's Animal Corner calendar, because I can never... Horned toad?
It is a horned frog.
Horned frog.
But the reason the frog toad thing happened is because of the hypnotoad. People think it looks like the hypnotoad, but it is technically a horned frog.
Hence, frog toad. But yes, it is a horned frog. Click on the horned frog. Purchase your 2021 TWIS Blair's Animal Corner calendar. They are available now. And while you're there, if you're interested in any other TWIS merchandise, head over, click the Zazzle store link, and peruse our wares. The holidays are coming up. TWIS goodies make great gifts. I would love to introduce our guest for the evening. Marta Zaraska is a Polish-Canadian science journalist who lives in a tiny French village in the countryside and recently wrote a book called Growing Young: How Friendship, Optimism, and Kindness Can Help You Live to 100. Now, Marta, as we get into this, I just want you to know, for full disclosure, Blair does want to live forever. So,
forever. Wow. For like 200. Just
200. Okay, that's my next book.
Okay.
How to live to 200.
Yes, exactly. How did you come to get into this topic? I mean, we all want to grow old gracefully, but what led to this book in particular?
I mean, I've been writing about this kind of topics for years now. I'm a science journalist. I write for the Washington Post, Scientific American, Discover, New Scientist. So these are topics I've been writing about for a long time. So nutrition, how to live healthy, how to be happy, psychology, mental health. So it was obviously all the time something that I was interested in. I was reading tons of research papers on this, and at the same time, I was trying to be healthy and in my everyday life, my personal life. I have a family, so I was trying to keep everybody eating well and exercising and so on and so on. At the same time, at my work, I was coming across more and more research showing that maybe perhaps diet and exercise were not the only things that were really important, and perhaps maybe not even the most important things. So there was particularly one meta-analysis of studies that I read that really opened my eyes to this topic of things that matter perhaps more than diet and exercise. And in this meta-analysis, the scientists showed that although things like diet and exercise are important, of course, for health, other things. So, for example, how socially included you are. So how connected you are to your community, whether you have a significant other, whether you have lots of friends, and so on and so on. This kind of social inclusion can lower your mortality risk by about 45%. Whereas when we are talking about diet and exercise, this is usually around 20 to 30% reduction of mortality risk.
40,
right? So
45?
45, yes. So it's huge.
It's huge.
So
I need to make more friends.
And when they actually put together like all the possible, I call them soft drivers of health. So like, all this kind of optimism and generally how you live your life socially and mentally, they came out actually with 65% of mortality reduction. And this is higher than quitting smoking if you smoke 2 packets a day. So this is really, really huge. So when I read that, I was like, okay, I'm obviously, not doing the best things I can to stay healthy and live long. All my organic matcha tea and so on might not be the best idea. And so I read about 600 research papers and talked to dozens of scientists, and I wrote Growing Young. And this has also changed the way I approach health and longevity in my personal life as well.
Are you, I mean, you're not having dinner parties right now, I would guess, but
We are in lockdown. Absolutely. I cannot leave my
Yeah.
house without permission. So
Yeah, this could be in the like a very, very unhealthy time. So aside from the pandemic, does this count as socializing?
it's better than texting. Actually, there is actual research showing that when you text people, you don't get the same amount of oxytocin release compared to when you call people. They haven't tested Zoom or the video calling, but I would assume it's even better than the voice calling. But definitely, still above is the actual connection when you can have a real eye contact, when you can touch. Touch releases also those social hormones, right? So definitely, video is not the same as contact in person. We also our noses, they're much more powerful than we realize, and we pick up all the scents that give us all this information about the other person. So definitely it's not the same.
That's what's been giving me away. But it's also, I imagine there's also like there's some microbiome transfer going on too amongst close contact.
Oh yeah, so we definitely exchange microbes with other people. So for example, when you do contact sports, right? So the two teams will exchange skin microbes between each other. We also exchange gut microbes. So with our family members, for example, even with our family pets. And there's some fascinating research being done on mice. I actually took my tiny little part in it. I was it's in Oxford, so I stuck around when the scientists were catching the mice for the research in the forest around Oxford University. They were measuring the microbiome of the mice. They also monitor who hangs out with whom. So these are probably the most monitored mice in the world, where they have all these cameras watching who goes where and all the time. And what they discovered is that the mice not only exchange microbes with their friends, but also the more diverse their networks of friends, the healthier their gut microbiome, which also gives you an idea, that probably will work similar in humans, because for now, generally the research on gut microbiome in mice translates pretty well to humans. So probably, if we also exchange the microbes, which we do, the more diverse our friendships networks, we probably also have more diverse gut microbiomes, which is absolutely fascinating, right? So if you're a loner, your gut's health may suffer, basically.
Right. Yeah. Diversity on all those counts is beneficial as far as we can tell. Also, you mentioned you went to Oxford to track the researchers who were trapping the mice, but you traveled all over the world for your work on this book. What were some of the most intriguing adventures that you got to go on?
I mean, so definitely, Japan was the big one. So I have a whole chapter on Japan. This is the longest living nation currently on the planet. And it was really fascinating because, I kind of came with some preconceptions, right, about Japan and what makes them live long. First of all, we've all heard about the Okinawa diet and so on and so on. And first of all, these days, Okinawa is not the longest lived part of Japan. It's actually Nagano Prefecture. So the mountainous part where they have they're really big mountains. They're actually called Alps as well. And just like in Europe. So this is where people in Japan live the longest right now. And even though diet there is also quite healthy, but what really struck me that when I talked with researchers and people there, the conversation really went very fast to things like purpose in life, for example, which, or social, the structure of the society. So things that really, when you talk to aging researchers in the West, usually they don't really come up, right? You talk about diet, exercise, cellular aging, mitochondria, things like that. But they really went into purpose in life very, very fast. So even to the point that they call it ikigai, is kind of a cousin of purpose in life. Suppose it doesn't translate very well. I don't speak Japanese, so I cannot really comment on that. But so they recognize this ikigai, so kind of purpose in life, as such an important component of our healthy aging and longevity that the actual Ministry of Health of Japan has included in their official health promotion strategy. And lots of research supports this idea that people who have ikigai, who have this purpose in life, live longer, healthier. They have less cardiovascular disease, for example. So this was really something that was particularly interesting to me. And what I also visited were so-called silver hair employment agencies. So these are employment agencies for elderly people in Japan. It sounds crazy for, at least for my Western mind. But for them, it's completely normal. And so what happens is when the Japanese people reach retirement age, some of them decide to not completely retire, but switch their career to something easy, usually part-time. And they don't do it really for the money. They do it to be involved in the community. So they go to the specialized retirement employment agencies and they'll get themselves a job as a public space gardener or helping children cross the street. And they do it exactly for this ikigai. So this involvement in community, for helping others, for having purpose in life. Again, it is also recognized as one of potential drivers of health and longevity in Japan.
So basically what that implication is that retirement could kill you. Because
I mean, I wouldn't go that far. It's very cultural. It's very cultural as well.
But it's interesting how you see people who were not able to retire and have to work late into their lives. And they often seem very different than the people who did retire. And you might assume that's because the people retired because they were feeling more old and tired, but maybe it's the other way around.
I think it's both. I mean, I'm writing an article for the Washington Post on this right now. So I'm really digging very deeply into this kind of retirement issue here. But, and it seems that it really depends. So it depends also on how you retire, right? So if you retire and just kind of give up on everything and just stay on your couch and watch Netflix the whole day, this kind of retirement definitely can be bad for your health. And not just because of the sitting on the couch part, just because of losing the connections, losing the purpose in life. Exactly. But if you retire and you stay active, you don't have to work. You can be volunteering. You can be just involved in your community or in your family, really, like having this ikigai, this purpose in life. Then it definitely can be still very good for your health. So it really depends how you approach it and whether retiring means losing all this kind of social part of working that is so important.
Yeah, I've known a lot of old guys who retired. And they thought, I got plenty to do when I'm retired. I got the honey-do list that I've got to get through. All those things that I've been asked to do over the years that kept getting put off. I'll go do that, and then I'll be fine. And then 2 months later, they're back in the workforce.
Yeah.
Because they got through the list. They sat on the couch. They looked around and went, is this all there is? I can't do this. No. I can't do this. And went back. But we've got TWIS. We can just keep doing this.
Yep.
Exactly.
Oh, we're gonna be fine.
That's gonna be great.
So I'm really curious, this idea behind needing a driver and a reason for living and all this kind of stuff. It sounds very kind of ethereal and like, more spiritual, but of course the science part of me is dragging me back down to like scientifically what's happening in the body. So is this stress? Is this anxiety? Is this a lack of kind of like positive social hormones that are happening in your body?
I mean, it's everything. So as you all know, our human bodies are extremely interconnected, right? So there are, for example, the social hormones. I've mentioned before that when we are touching or having direct eye contact with other people, we have the oxytocin release. So this is one of the social hormones. Then you have serotonin, endorphins, vasopressin. So these are all the so-called social hormones that link the way we live our lives socially and you could say mentally and how our bodies function, right? For example, you have oxytocin, so this so-called love hormone that, makes you connected to people. But on the other hand, it has very biological direct effects on the body. So for instance, it influences our immune system. It also, for example, promotes bone growth. Serotonin, on the other hand, another social hormone, it regulates body temperature. It can affect liver health. So these are very direct biological effects. So this is part of it. Then you have the stress axis, right? So the HPA axis, for instance, and our social connections influence how the stress, the fight or flight response acts in our body. So we evolved, we are social apes. We evolved to be surrounded by others, and our bodies function the best when we are with our tribe, when we are connected, when we feel basically secure in the tribe. So when we are alone, when we are, for example, ostracized or excluded from the tribe, then our bodies start reacting differently. So for example, when you are with other people, you are much more likely to catch viruses, as we've learned very well these days. So our bodies up the antiviral response. But when you are alone, when you're lonely, you no longer need the kind of such a powerful antiviral response. And instead, our body switches to antibacterial response, to inflammation, which made perfect sense when, in our ancestral times, when being alone usually meant being alone on the savannah. So being much more likely to be wounded, for instance, right? Hurt by wild animals, and such wounds could be brimming with bacteria. So you needed to up your antibacterial response. But of course, our bodies are always trying to save on energy. So, to up the antibacterial response, the antiviral response would go down. What it means for today, for instance, is that when we are feeling lonely, our antiviral response still goes down. And you can see it on the gene expression level. This is very unfortunate, of course, for today, because, we are feeling lonely because we're, for example, in lockdown in our houses all alone. And at the same time, our response to viruses goes down, which is very, very unfortunate, right? So, so all these things are super, super biological. We also mentioned the gut microbiome as well. So that's another very biological connection between how we are with other people and how our bodies function.
You mentioned your Western perspective, and you are a Western perspective in Europe, which is a bit different in terms of social connections and the way that communities work and people work with each other than it is in America. And I know that the Western perspective here in America has led us to be very independent. My question here culturally is, what have you found, or what have you seen from a cultural standpoint in Western society? We've always put our long life expectancies down to our diet and exercise and our medicine. Mm-hmm. And suddenly life expectancies are starting to drop.
I mean, certainly, United States is the most individualistic nation on the planet, right? According to this research. So there is something to it, that's for certain. And yes, it's not the longest lived either among the developed nations. And so there are some troubling signs, definitely both Canadians as well, right? We put a lot of trust in things like diet, and by diet, unfortunately, often people don't mean the kind of the reasonable eat healthy diet where, just eat your veggies and stay away from sugar and junk food, but going too much into the fat diet. So this is also what I write about. I have a whole chapter in Growing Young about it, how that we put too much belief in fat diets and miracle foods and all this kind of, heritage organic broccoli and supplements as well, and exercise trackers and all this kind of miraculous solutions or one pill solutions to longevity and health, that you just take this or, do this particular exercise tracked by your app and you will be perfectly fine. Unfortunately, this kind of reductionist approach, it doesn't work. Our bodies are very complicated and we are social creatures and we need more, right? Diet is very important. So is exercise, but they're fairly simple. So as Michael Pollan has said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And if you do that, you'll be generally fine.
Right.
And, the same with exercise. You generally have to move. You don't have to do this kind of, crazy things that we are doing with all this special fitness gadgets and so on and so on. And, so there is this, and so this is definitely much more prevalent in Canada or US than, for example, in France, where I live right now, where people seem to be more relaxed about how they eat, and eating here also it's a much more social affair. So one statistic I really like is that for example in US most vast majority of people, so I think those 61% of people, eat their meals always on their own and, usually in front of the TV. Whereas, for example, in France, it's the opposite. So most people will be eating with their family every single night. And they're really obsessed about it. When my daughter, who's very French, when she was 3 years old, she actually refused to eat any meals at all if we were not sitting at the table with her. She was like, no, I'm not even touching it. So,
Oh, wow. Oh, I love it.
And, they're very much into this eating. When I still lived in Canada, I was, usually I would think nothing twice about eating in my car or eating a sandwich while walking down the street. Whereas in France, it's a horrible, horrible faux pas. Just don't do that. You are supposed to eat at the table and preferably exactly with others, for hours talking and so on. So this kind of, which also, brought me to thinking about the so-called Mediterranean diet, right? Which is definitely a good type of eating. And we always analyze, how much wine they are drinking, how much cheese they're eating, what kind of vegetables, olive oil, and so on and so on. Whereas, we don't really pay enough attention to how these foods are eaten, because in all these cultures, so French, Italians, Spanish, they not only eat certain foods, but they eat them in certain way. And it's a very social way, right? They eat them with other people. They take their time. They have long conversations. So, taking this kind of diet and eating the Mediterranean diet alone in your car will not bring you the same benefits.
Well, not to mention, you definitely eat more if you're, for example, eating by yourself in front of the TV than if you eat while talking amongst a bunch of other people. Like, it paces you, I think about that all the time. If you sit down to a meal at a table, there's a pacing involved in your eating, and you kind of feel that you're full and then you stop eating. But if you're just shoveling it in all by yourself, you're likely to eat more because it's happening faster and you're not paying attention.
Yeah, there's within the so-called biohacking movement, where people are attempting to, as you mentioned, they've got body trackers and they're tracking all of their activity and the food that they eat and putting butter in their coffee. I've come across a new fad, which is a dopamine fast. And for the it's the idea is that because of modern technology and being connected all the time, that our devices through the algorithms are constantly stimulating the dopamine, because they're basically like Facebook slot machine, keep scrolling, and your dopamine keeps going. And so instead of just unplugging from social media, though, they take complete breaks from people, from all stimulation, and they're talking as if this is a good thing. I'm wondering if you've come across this at all.
I haven't come across it, but parts of it sound perfectly rational and actually a good idea. So the technology part, definitely being addicted to your phone is doing nothing good to your brain or to your health, because also because it's we know that spending too much time on your phone, or even, placing your phone during conversations actually destroys the quality of connections with other people. There is already, more and more research on that. But on the other hand, completely isolating yourself, because, we do get dopamine hits, for example, from things like kindness. So kindness gives you a dopamine. Is it good to have a, fast from this kind of dopamine hits? Probably not. Or, from connecting with your loved ones as well. So should we be, fasting from that? Yeah. This is, I think it's again, it's too much, too many things in one kind of bag. Yes, try not to look at your phone too much, but complete isolation and trying not to get any dopamine, that's even if it's possible, right?
The neuroscience doesn't quite fit, but
yeah, it's like, a lot of things are rewarding, right? So food can be rewarding, like anything. So unless you could stop eating, stop breathing, and I don't know, it's like some
Yeah, I think it's another example of extremes.
I like the idea of that. I like the idea of the sort of no interaction reset, though. It sounds sort of like just going to the cabin in the woods and getting away from everything for a while. And then when you go back and re-interact with society and people again, Maybe you're seeing them more one-on-one. Maybe the television that was always on, maybe it seems like noise now because it's just too much. I don't know.
I mean, the television on definitely is not a good idea, but the hermit style, well.
Dude, I don't mean it as a lifestyle. I mean as a sort of like a spa treatment for your brain. Letting all
there's definitely
those
evidence for
natural
that.
interactions reset back down to just nothing, silent, and then go enter society again. It sounds like it would work.
It sounds like lockdown.
It sounds like lockdown.
Yeah, it's been great. Can you imagine going to a movie now? You'd be like, wow, that would be so overstimulating right now because we've sort of walked back that interaction for a while. I don't know. I can see the benefits of it anyway. Potentially.
On the other side of that, you also talk about things like hugging centers, and there are movements among different groups of people where people come together who are strangers for hugs, for physical contact. Where they don't have that physical contact. And I'm wondering if you have evidence to the benefit of physical contact with strangers versus contact with people that are friends, that are people that you're familiar with.
I mean, yes. So the hugging center, that was another part of my research for Growing Young. I went to a center like that. This particular one was in Poland, although there are plenty of those things as well on the Western coast, in California, in Western Canada, I think also in Ontario, in UK. But I went to one in Warsaw, Poland. So the hugging center, the idea is it's some kind of like cross between a spa and a psychotherapist office. So you go there because you feel that you don't have enough hugs or enough physical contact with other people. It felt very weird for me at the very beginning. It's kind of the whole idea of, hugging a stranger. And when I arrived, I got a little card with all the positions that were possible. So spooning or patting your hair or just classic hugging and stuff like that. So yeah, it was very, very, very weird at first, but the lady was a professional, I guess. So she knew how to relax me into the hugging. So yes, it was some kind of a cross between a massage and psychotherapy, because you can also talk and chat about your life and stuff like that. And surprisingly, there is lots of people who actually come to those things and pay good money to be hugged. And which is a sad thing when you think about it, that so many people don't have anybody in their lives with whom they can get this kind of physical contact. And yes, you can go for psychotherapy, but it's not the same, because, psychotherapy is about talking about your problems, and you generally are not supposed to be hugging all the time with your therapist. Whereas massage is also can be very impersonal. Your massage therapist can be thinking about her dinner plans while massaging you. So there's some kind of a cross. And when you think about it, 25% of Americans don't have a single friend in whom they can confide. So no wonder they may need someone, even a stranger, to hug. And you ask me, how does it compare in kind of the social hormone release with hugging friends or your family? And we don't really have research on that yet, but we know, for example, from other studies, that massage therapy can release this kind of social hormone. My guess would be that it's not as good as when you are connecting with the people whom you actually really care about, but it's better than nothing, right? There is something in it as well. So even holding hands with stranger can also give you this boost. And if you really are missing something here, if you really don't have this connection, it can be good. So the therapist in the center where I went, she told me, for example, that her clients are either people who exactly have no friends for various reasons, or, for example, they're new to the city, or they feel their parents didn't hug them enough when they were children. So there are lots of reasons why people need that. And it's just part of the way our society is, I guess, that this kind of places are needed.
Yeah, well, some people need a lot more than hugs from strangers. So the hugging thing sounds like a very sweet practice, actually. That sounds pretty awesome. And it actually makes me question why therapists don't hug their patients. Why they don't have masseuse therapists who massage you while you're telling them all about your fears and frets and frustrations and That would be the best combination.
See, then you have something new.
Yeah, you have something new, and then it's like, oh, I can really, now I feel like I'm both mentally and physically relaxed in the same space, and it might be painful on both fronts, but it seems like that would be the way to do it. Yeah, I like this hugging therapy. It's the wrong time to invest in it, folks. So right now, you're going to have to wait.
That's all pre-COVID,
I'd be very interested to see some data on generational differences, gender differences, cultural differences on hugging, because I don't feel like I have to know a person that well to give them a hug. I've definitely had mild acquaintances tell me, "Oh my God, I'm having a terrible day. Will you give me a hug?" And they get a hug. So I think
I just want to double check, because sometimes I'm a little slow. Is hugging? Are we using that as a euphemism?
No.
Okay.
Just
making
just a hug, Justin.
We're just been talking about hugs.
Okay. Well, sometimes, and it's like over my head. I just want to make sure I've not missed it. It is hug.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've also been asked by people I don't know super well, do you need a hug? And I'm like, yes. And it helps. And I don't know. It's very odd to me that, for my personal experience, I have not seen this barrier of a lack of availability of hugs, and I don't think it's because it's not solely people I'm incredibly close to that I'm getting them from, I guess is my point. So I'm very curious if I'm in a unique situation here that I just know a lot of people that are like huggy, I guess, or if it's something that there are specific kind of centers that this could be focused on to make sure people have an outlet, because I've certainly experienced the power of a hug.
I mean, it is definitely very cultural, right? So in France, where I live now, people, they don't really hug, but they kiss all the time, right? I mean, the kind of the bees, on the two cheeks where you are exactly. And for me, it was very strange when I moved here first time, because, you, for example, you meet your friend and your friend is coming with a group of their friends you've never seen before, and you're supposed to kiss everybody, including the guys, which is like, for me, it was kind of weird at first. But so there are definitely some cultural differences. And in other cultures, people kind of keep their distance much more, and which is very good for the pandemic times, not very good maybe for the social hormones. But so there is very strong cultural thing going on as well. But in general, we all need a connection, and this is also a question sometimes I'm asked by readers. What about the introverts and extroverts, right? Do we all need to party and have 100 friends and so on and so on? But the truth is that we don't. So what you really need is a connection, whatever your style. So for some people, the connection means they really need a lot of friends. And if they don't, they feel unhappy, they feel they're lonely. And so they really need that. Whereas for some other people who are more introverted, having this kind of one-on-one connection. So you just meet one person at a time, one neighbor at a time, one family member, one friend is perfectly fine as well. What is not fine is when you are among those 25% of people, Americans who have not a single person in whom they can confide. If you are lonely, for example, people who are lonely, they have shorter telomeres, right? They have different gene expression related to cancer, to the immune system. They unfortunately have much higher mortality risks. So obviously, if you are feeling lonely, then your needs are not being met, and something should be changed.
What's interesting is that's going to tie into a story that I've got coming up in the second half. It ties into some conservative voting patterns too. People who the glimpse of the story that's coming up is the interesting thing is this will be about Christian nationalists. These people who identify them as voting based on their Christian ideals for support of Trump aren't churchgoers. They are not people who have a connection to their church any longer, and they tend to be very isolated. And so it's a really interesting sort of thing that you're describing, because this sounds like the people who need hugs. It sounds like these are people who need this hugging therapy immediately.
Possible.
And it is weird. I grew up.
That will be the next canvassing for the next election. People going out. Do you need a hug today?
So I grew up with a very affectionate family, kiss on the lips on the way out the door to school, all that sort of stuff. It was just so normal and natural. And then I noticed that it didn't happen at other households. Like sometimes, yeah, but not like, it was just sort of a weird thing. You just assume everybody's getting a hug when they have a bad day. But it's if it's not true, then that's an incredibly different way of going through the world. And to recognize that you've been lacking hugs and go seek them out, that's beautiful.
So how can we take these lessons? There's the scientific evidence that, that connection, having this connection to your community, to your family, to other individuals, friends, is beneficial to us in the long term, that it's going to help us live healthier, potentially longer lives, right? So how do we go about teaching this? How do we go about creating a world of community?
I mean, it's not just the connection, right? So I write about also things like kindness, empathy, volunteering, optimism, conscientiousness, right? So this kind of propensity of keeping your desk clean and being on time for meetings and things like that, mindfulness. So all of these things together, these are all the soft drivers of health I'm describing and growing young. So definitely, for me, the first step is just to realize that it's not just diet and exercise, and it's definitely not the kind of diet and exercise we've talked about. So, supplements and exercise gadgets. There is much more. There's a big picture of just living well, being connected, having purpose in life as well is extremely important. Being empathetic, being kind, being optimistic. So the way you live your life. So this is why I also call the book Growing Young, because it's about growing as a person, right? So if you grow as a person, your body will kind of maybe not definitely become younger, but it will stay younger longer. We'll be aging better if we grew as people, if we develop a kind of mental habits, social habits that are good for us. And I think exactly the first step is just to realize that these things are important, because we don't hear about it and we don't really read a lot about it. And the reason for that, I believe, is that there is no money for anybody to be made on it. When you think about diet and exercise, all the gadgets and pills and miracle foods and fat diet and so on, there is just no money in it, right? There are companies, producers, there's advertising, there is marketing, all this going on to sell us something. Whereas when we're talking about being kind to someone, being connected, going for a walk with your friends, trying to stay optimistic, finding purpose in life, these are things that don't have any monetary value. Nobody's trying to sell you anything here. So, and this is why it doesn't make it to the news. It doesn't make it on the social media or to the influencers and YouTube videos, because there are no products. And if there are no products, well, we don't hear about it. So just change the perspective. Yeah.
How do we learn to turn a profit on kindness? Like, how do we make some money out of this empathy thing? Well, because then it'll make it popular, right? We'll get a marketing team. No, I mean,
I used to enjoy it. People still bring up the catchphrase, the pay it forward, that became popular. I think it was back in the 90s. And it's the idea of when somebody does something good for you, you do something good for other people. And it's always take whatever you have and pay it forward into the lives of other people. Because if you help others, maybe that makes their life easier. Maybe it makes a connection. Maybe it also makes you feel more positive about things.
And it works, There was the story in Tim Hortons, our national Canadian coffee chain. There was in the drive-through, like several years ago, there was one driver paid for the bill of the driver behind him just because he was being kind. And, a chain developed. So each person felt, really grateful for their meal being bought by someone else. So they kept paying for the driver behind. And there were over 200 people have done it. So, it was just absolutely crazy. I've never seen healthy eating or, broccoli eating or matcha drinking spread the same way. It's amazing, right? How this kind of kindness can really go around.
Yeah. And if we can promote that. And I think there's, the value in it isn't monetary. It's,
I mean, in the long, in a long way, it is okay. If we are talking about monetary value, there is some monetary value to the healthcare system. So
Okay,
there are
there we
actual
go.
studies. There are studies showing how much maybe not on kindness yet, but there are studies on loneliness, for example, or on things like neuroticism, so personality traits, how much they cost the healthcare system. And these are, billions of dollars we are talking about here. That's why in the UK, they now have a ministry for loneliness in the government, because they recognize it as a health issue, a really big problem for the healthcare system, which costs a lot of money. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if somebody did calculate how much kindness also benefits the healthcare system. I haven't seen studies like this yet, but, there is money in it as well for the exactly healthcare system.
I think that's amazing. And there's a question in our chat room. Can you get some of these positive benefits from hugging your dogs and your animals? Do those count?
I mean, they're obviously not as good as hugging people, but there is some research. There is not a lot of it, but there is one study I've seen done looking into your dog's eyes, and it does cause an oxytocin release as well, both in the owner and in the dog as well. So there are certainly some benefits of looking into your dog's eyes.
I have cats, and they take that as a threat, so I don't know.
Yeah, it works with domesticated animals, I'm afraid. So.
Okay, so if I'm thinking about my to-do list real quick of how to live forever,
to-do,
yes. I want to sum this up. Okay, so basically, be a good person, right?
Try.
Keep your social connections, and find meaning in something that I do. And kind of sustain that.
Stay optimistic as well. Optimism is a big thing too. Can add 10 years to your life, according to research.
Oh, I've got a free 10 right there. Easy.
Okay.
That one was easy. Oh, that's the easiest. That's the easiest thing I've ever done for my health.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you want to touch on or tell us about your book before we go here?
I mean, there's so much more. I could talk for hours, so I'm not sure how many hours we have here. There's, lots of things we still haven't touched on. So,
I know.
Exactly, the personality, the mindfulness, marriage as well. There's so much more going on, but I don't think we can even.
The personality type one is a little frightening, because as much as I feel like it's possible to change diet or throw yourself out there socially more, or make sure that you're getting a new hobby if this one isn't working out, or find a new job, or whatever it is that keeps you engaged, and all of these different things that you can tell. Boy, I feel like sometimes people's deal is just their deal.
I mean, there's lots and lots of new research coming in showing that personality can be changed as well, and actually much more than we realize. And we've been doing it for a long time. Psychotherapy in a way is changing personality, a personality trait of neuroticism, and it works well. And other personalities types also can be changed, especially the ones that are most important for health. So, for example, conscientiousness. And the usual recommendation of researchers who do study those things is that basically to fake it until you make it. So if you want to, for example, become more conscientious, you just behave like a conscientious person. Like, for example, today I will clean my desk. Just one thing, small steps, right? Just like with exercise or any kind of habits change. You just do small adjustments, and after several months, you can actually see that you become much more conscientious. So it does work. There is some genetic, basis to our personality, obviously, but there is a genetic basis to a lot of things. For example, you mentioned exercise, but we all differ in our anatomical features and in our muscles. For example, I wasn't born with a particularly, muscular type, but it doesn't mean I give up on exercise. I'm still trying, right? I'll never be Usain Bolt, but I still run, and I still try to run better. And it's the same thing with empathy, for example, which also has a lot of genetic, component to it, or other, personality traits, conscientiousness, neuroticism, optimism as well has some genetic basis to it. But we still can improve a lot, no matter where we start.
I think it would be amazing for people to really work on empathy for others outside of their in-group.
Yeah, and if that fails, psilocybin in the water supply.
Psilocybin, make everyone happy. Takes. There we go.
Whatever it takes.
Come to Oregon. Oregon, that's where.
If that's what it takes to have a healthy society.
Yeah. Marta, thank you so much for joining us tonight or your morning. I know you have
good morning.
Yes,
Yeah.
a long day ahead of you unless you take a nap. Your book, Growing Young, is available now, and it's got wonderful stories, wonderful science, and really great writing. Thank you for being here and talking with us today, and just really appreciate it. Where can people find you and find out more about the book?
I mean, so I think the good place to start is the book's website. You have there are more resources there as well. So it's www.growingyoungthebook.com. And you can connect with me on Twitter my handle is mzaraska. So it's Zaraska.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I do hope that you stay young and are able to maintain your optimism and connections even in the midst of this pandemic, as I hope that we all will. And have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Bye.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Bye. All right, everybody. That was Marta Zaraska, and you, as she said, can find her book at growingyoungthebook.com. This is This Week in Science. If you want to help us grow, you know what you could do? Get a friend to subscribe today. You know, we're talking about connection and friends and family. Yes, community. Help grow TWIS. We would love your help. That would be just amazing. Tell somebody to subscribe to TWIS today. All right, as we come back, hey, Blair. What time is it? It is that time. It's that time for Where's Justin? Nope, we're not playing that game. It's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
Yeah, Blair.
Ghost Justin asked me what I got. Well, first, I have some touchy fish.
Touchy fish?
Touchy-feely
Really?
fish. This is a university from the this is a study from the University of Chicago, as opposed to a university from the study of Chicago. And this is looking at round gobies. That's Neogobius melanostomus. And they wanted to see if fish had some sort of feeling of touch in their fingers, considering you could do many things without being able to see, and just by touch, you could kind of try to figure out where you are. I'm immediately reminded of a place called the Tactile Dome that I went when I was a child.
Yes,
It was
great
dark,
place.
and then you crawled
The
through this whole
Exploratorium
view
in San
dome.
Francisco.
Yeah, and you could feel kind of what was going on in each room, but even though it was dark. Anyway, so our sense of touch is really developed. And so these researchers from the University of Chicago wanted to know if fish had a similar ability of a sense of touch, mainly because a lot of fish are in contact with the bottom of water, of a body of water, the kind of the floor, constantly. And so if they're constantly kind of scooting along mud or rocks, they might want to be able to feel what's going on. So to test this, they had to figure out kind of how they maneuvered over these different sorts of things and what were going on with nerve signals. They wanted to record nerve signals from individual fin rays. So those are the individual kind of lines that go down the fins. Those are called the fin rays. And so what they did is they had the fish go over a piece of slate, so something very slick, or a wavy piece of plastic on the tank bottom. And they were able to film that. They also filmed when they wedged themselves against the side of the tank. And the fish's fins splayed out over the surface like a hand laid upon them. So basically, I guess I didn't really think about it before, but if you lay your hand out on a thing, you kind of subconsciously fan out your fingers. And so that's what these fins were also doing. So it's very interesting. So looking at the behavior, it looks like they're kind of feeling the floor. To figure out actually what's happening, they had to look at the nerves. So they brought a short horizontal bar along a fin ray towards the tip of the fin. So they kind of had this little bar underneath the fin and pulled it forward. And they did it at speeds ranging from 5 millimeters per second to 20 millimeters per second, and recorded the electrical signals in nerves as the bar moved over the fin. And based on what they saw, it was clear that the fins sensed when they were being touched. Okay, great. Step one. They have some sort of feeling in their fins. But in addition, they saw that each nerve on each little fin ray only sensed contact along a tiny portion of each fin ray. So there were individual nerves along each fin ray for each little section of fin. So that would make sense. They'd be able to feel fine surface detail. To kind of test that even further, the next step of the study was to design a rotating wheel with 2 millimeter wide ridges along the edge. They had gaps of 3, 5, or 7 millimeters. And that was to mimic different kind of sediment textures. So ranging from coarse sand to granules to pebbles. So those are kind of the 3 to 5 to 7 millimeters. So tiny little things to big clunky things that they're touching. They then rolled the wheel along the fish's fin ray at speeds from 20 to 80 millimeters per second. And it took many designs of this kind of funny wheel of fortune to figure out how this would work best. But eventually they were able to catch the nerve signals, and they saw that they synchronized with each ridge as it contacted the ray, regardless of the gaps. So the nerve signals firing matched the pattern of the ridges moving across the skin, even when the speed was faster. So this is actually similar to tests that have been done on monkey finger pads, and they seem to be as sensitive to coarse surfaces as the monkey finger pads. Of course, this is definitely a first step, difficult to tell just with a goby too. Like, can you train them to differentiate between different textures and then make it dark and then have them touch it and do a behavior? I don't know if you could do that with a goby. You could try, but I would say that would probably be a real way to try to test their sense of touch, is to see if they could make decisions based on what they felt, right? So that would be, if I was running this study, that would be my next step. But the real interesting thing here is if they do have a kind of a developed sense of touch in their fins, this is interesting because primates and fish, obviously, they diverged a pretty long time
ago.
Yeah. And this response seems similar. And so that might mean an early development of this sense of touch. This might be really at the very beginning of vertebrate evolution or before, who knows? And so this touch sensibility is something that we've, of course, as we human like to do, we've kind of identified primates as the ones that do it, and they're special for it. But really, maybe not.
Well,
okay, they chose the gobies. They chose the gobies, but these are rock bottom dwelling fish that where it would be important for them to touch things and be able to feel their surroundings. And, as opposed to a fish that's hanging out in the water column all the time and never touches anything except water. So I'm skeptical of that conclusion.
So this is where it gets difficult, and we need our time machine, because a tuna that's never going to touch the ground, they might have lost that ability over evolutionary time because they didn't need it.
So
we need our phylogenies. There we go.
Right.
We need to look at DNA. We need to figure out where this started.
But I mean, wouldn't that be like, I'm assuming if we're going way, way back, the first sort of thing was probably kind of a slimy, crawly thing, and touch sensing was probably there before vision or auditory. I mean,
no. So those came. I mean, if you're talking about vertebrates, fish came before amphibians. So if you're talking about
no. I'm talking about before fish.
Okay, you're talking
way before fish.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I'm talking about the first animal multicellular slime mold
Sure.
creature, whatever it was.
Talk about worms or some stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, even worms, even trilobites, whatever they are that you're going back in, they were going to be crawly, touchy. They weren't swimmers. They weren't, they might have been free floating thingies. You can sort of imagine something that small, but it seems like touch sensory to explore the outside world would have been like the first sense. Like it would have been there before you got to any of the other senses for the external world.
Yeah.
So I can see it being pre-fish. Absolutely.
Sure. And I mean, it's one of the 5 senses. So like there is part of it to me that I'm like, well, it's kind of just part of being alive, is being able to feel your way around. Right.
Yeah.
So it all kind of depends on how developed of a sense of touch you're talking about too.
I mean, and just nerve endings at near this outer air, like pain sensor. Where's it coming from would be helpful. You know, is this a thing that could cause pain that I'm touching? Or is this a good thing that I want to get closer to? You know, just something on that simple level. Is this a warmer area, colder? Whatever it is, I think touch has been, it doesn't seem surprising that fish could feel things. Like,
your appendages are going to be sensitive. What kind of sense?
Yeah.
That's really the question.
And and that's the point of this really, is that we consider our touch, the primate sense of touch, to be so advanced and well, our fingertips are so finely attuned to things. They're magic machines, right?
Well, they kind of are, though, compared to the rest of our bodies.
Right, but at the
within
same time,
every creature, there's going to be, you know, I would assume the elephant's prehensile trunk.
But you're not listening at this. But what I'm saying is that we have this human-centric view, and we're like, oh, our fingers are so amazing. And so it's hard for us as humans, or it shouldn't be, but it has been hard for us to understand that other animals would have these amazing sensory abilities as well. So it's like, ooh, fish have a sense of touch like people. Who knew? So
well, quit mocking Blair for bringing the story. I mean, it's a good story. They needed to do this study. My goodness.
Okay. Well, moving on to
touchy fish. I hope they touch each other.
Just so violent mongooses.
What?
So mongooses are female-led. So they're a matriarchal society.
So they're probably more peaceful than other societies, right?
In this case, no.
Oh.
So female banded mongooses, they have kind of a funny thing where, because their group is pretty much all related to one another, mongooses don't leave after they're born. So the males are usually related in some way to the matriarch. The females kind of convince the whole group to go to war with another mongoose group, so the females can sneakily mate with the males from the other group while everyone's fighting.
That's sneaky.
So this is a study from University of Exeter and the University of Cambridge. They have found specific, quote, exploitative leadership in mongooses. This is also seen in humans, of course, lions, chimpanzees. This is something where the leaders of a group are decoupled from the cost of their choices, and the cost of their choices are amplified in the destructive nature of intergroup conflict. So basically, the leaders are not the ones that feel the fallback from starting conflict. So this decoupling of like the consequences of their actions, I guess. And so this is potentially why, at least in this case, but potentially in other species as well, there has been this kind of continued evolution of severe collective violence in animal society. So this is where, in a normal situation, if the entire group went to war, then the one in charge, this female in this case, as well as all of her progeny would be equally kind of injured, have kind of drawbacks from that, and so there would be a reason not to go to this war unnecessarily, I suppose. But it seems that in this case, the males within the group are mostly the ones that pay the cost, and there's this very real reason to do it, which is that they need that new genetic injection into their group.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a survival strategy in this instance. Absolutely.
Yeah, but you can see how there's lots of other animal societies where they find a way around this.
Yeah.
Like maybe a male sneaks off and gets into the other colony and mates with the female and then sneaks back, or the female sneaks away and gets some of that other genetic material and comes back.
Or
there's other ways to do it.
As violent a society as baboons are thought to have, the males all leave their troop and go off to a different and join a different troop and have to get embedded there. And they don't. So yeah, there's different strategies. Certainly, the mongooses decided to have a big brawl and then they go off and then do sneaky mating. I guess because the problem would be if the female just went over there to find a mate outside of the group, it would be her against everyone. It would just be, it wouldn't work. Yeah. So sounds like.
And so that's kind of where this gets odd, because with the society that you're describing, Justin, is also like what lions do. And so the idea is males, it's male led, it's patriarchal. And so when the males are old enough, they're kicked out. They develop bachelor prides for a while as they get older, and then they show up to challenge a male patriarch from another pride. And if they win, then they are now the head. What that does is it creates turnover in who's the main provider of the male genes in that group. So there's a regular turnover, like every couple years, there's a new male. So you don't get this unnecessary flood of genes from one father. But it also means that male, by design, the way that works out is not related to any of the females in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a matriarchal society, it gets a little more complicated because the only males in that group were born of her.
Yes.
So, Kiki, you're muted. Sorry. But
yeah.
Yeah. So it complicates things a little more. And the way that the society has figured it out is to start fights with other groups. But it's something that scientists have known mongoose do for a long time, that they start these weird rivalries between different groups, but they don't know exactly why, what sparks it. And now they think they know this is the deal. It's because the female needs
to increase the gene pool.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is, by the way, for the listening audience, they have a very frightening looking photo up on right now, which is about 11 versus 11 mongooses all squaring off and like baring teeth and getting ready to brawl. It's very frightening looking.
It's like two mongoose football teams.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Or rugby teams, maybe.
Yeah, they look, and they're all giving their fierce mongoose look at the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that looks scary.
Yes, and I had forgotten the collective noun for mongoose, so I wanted to look it up just so
Mongoose?
I know. And now you all will know. No, it's mongooses, but
Mongoose.
the collective noun, like a pride of lions. It's a pack, a gang, or a mob.
Mob.
Which
I
makes
like mob
sense.
of mongooses.
Yeah, it makes sense based on what we just talked about.
Yeah, it totally does. That's fascinating, but it's like, hey, girls, go fight. I need to take care of something.
Yeah. Yep.
Girls,
or, hey, all my sons.
Yeah.
Mommy needs you to do something for her.
Mommy needs you to go take care of something.
Yeah. I heard them call you names over there. Go tell them.
Such a bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. This is This Week in Science, and if you are just tuning in, we have a few more stories to go, and calendars are here. Head to TWIS.org to get ready for 2021 with a TWIS Blair's Animal Corner calendar. A link for orders is on our website. Go to the horned frog, frog toad. Click on that. And thank you for listening to TWIS. Thank you for being a part of our audience. And if you are able, please help us continue to do what we do by bringing our show to you and to others every week. With your help, we can continue to do it week after week after week. Click the Patreon link at twist.org, choose your level of support, and know that you are helping to bring science and sanity to more people in the world. We really can't do it without you. Thank you for your support. All right, Justin, I think it's your turn. You got some stories?
Yeah. So this is. I've got one more story for the end of the show. This is a lot of people have been wondering about, talking about, pondering, being amazed by the fact that the next former president was so popular against people who identified themselves as very Christian or nationalistic Christians, as they're going to be defined here, despite the fact that he seemed to have zero of the qualities considered virtuous or good by Christianity. 7 for 7 in deadly sins on a daily basis. 10 Commandments is basically like a bucket list of things to break. So what gives? What was the connection here? Why does this make any sense whatsoever? Research by LSU sociologists indicates it wasn't Christian nationalism that drove churchgoers to vote for Trump in 2016. They're using 2016 because even now we don't have the actual data who voted for who. We have some ideas, but the better data comes out by sometime next year.
Yeah.
Rather surprisingly, though, to those doing the study, Christian nationalism was important amongst non-churchgoers. And that likely drove many of his supporters to the polls also in 2020. But the research shows Christian nationalist support of Trump isn't tied to religious institutions, religious teachings, attending church on a regular basis, or anything that is Christian. It's actually much more tied to people who have stopped attending church or have not attended church in a very long time, but still identify themselves as Christians. Regardless of the political or personal background, voters who hold strong Christian nationalist values voted for Trump at high levels, despite not going to church. The researchers define Christian nationalism as a set of beliefs about how Christianity should be prioritized in public life, in laws, and in America's national identity. Think about that. They want to prioritize Christianity into every aspect of the nation of the United States, despite not actually practicing it in any sort of traditional way, at least, right? So this is going to be in a paper, sociological forum titled Unchurched Christian Nationalism in the 2016 Presidential Election. And they sort of calling for a little bit of nuance in how we explain the so-called religious vote for Trump. Another finding that they found here, detachment from religious communities intensify conservative attitudes. Detachment from religious communities. Quoting, who am I quoting here? This is the authors in general quoting from the paper. The 2016 election may not have been a straightforward story of religious communities coalescing around Christian nationalistic candidate. Christian nationalism operates differently for those inside and outside of religious institutions, and religion's most dynamic effects on U.S. politics may have less to do with what happens inside churches than how people, whether they are individually religious or not, use religious ideas to draw and impose boundaries around their national identity. It seems to be sort of a larger, they say the Christian nationalism can be seen as an aspect of a larger populist ethos of victimization, embattlement, and resentment. Now, remember, think back to the interview we just had of people who become isolated and lonely, also having more health issues, having maybe physical, mental health issues, as well as all of this, and how prevalent they found 25% of people having this, being in this lonely state where they have no one in which to confide. And these are people who are identifying as a thing that they are not connected to, but they still have this identity. Trump received significant support from alienated Americans who appear to be disengaged from religious congregations and other social institutions. Second, how Christian nationalist rhetoric can indicate nostalgia. So nostalgia for the age that never existed, make it great again.
Right.
You know, back when. Identifying with maybe the childhood vision of what Christianity was in this case. Or it can be used as a veil for increasingly unpopular opinions, racial bias, anti-LGBTQ views, that sort of thing. Referencing previous research, the authors write that many Americans now feel they are victimized for expressing traditional values concerning marriage, sexuality, and gender identity. Again, outside of any institutionalized belief system in this. They point out that religious communities can have a stress buffering effect. So people feel less desperate for an authoritarian figure like Trump. So this is like going into being part of a community, having those social interactions, maybe getting the hugs at the church has a sort of stress buffering effect where you don't feel like everything is under assault. If you're watching certain networks that tell you everything is under assault. If you're in a community that's having a perfectly fine time living out the ideals of that religion. It also suggests that the disconnect isn't really there. If Trump talks religious without acting like a religious person to people who consider themselves religious without themselves participating in religion or acting religious themselves. Really fascinating in contrast to what we were just talking about.
Yeah. I think you're onto something there. That the connection and the being connected to something that is palpable as community is something greater than you. And you have somebody who's a pastor at the church. You have your community that buffers your connection with God, with the Holy Trinity, however you define it, and that connection is strengthened by your community. And so you don't need an authoritarian to come in and be that higher figure to tell you what to do. And you've also, yes, your identity is tied into your beliefs and your community and what you're a part of. But when your identity is also, you've had to bolster it because you've become separated and maybe independent from that community. You've had to, put up a brick wall and define things very strictly. And so your identity maybe becomes a bit firmer, and the rhetoric that politically that comes out politically then speaks to that identity, the fear, the feeling that you're being attacked or whatever it may be, and speaks to that identity, and then makes you feel like you're a part of something greater. So there's
that becomes the community.
That becomes a community. It's a need, maybe that need for belonging, need for connection. Very deep psychological roots in all of this, for sure.
Those conspiracy theory Facebook groups come in and all that kind of stuff.
Anything else can take its place because you're already doing mystical wish thinking on some level, and you never developed it You developed largely outside of a structured mythical magical thinking. I know there's not enough pews in the United States for everybody who calls themselves a Christian to go to on any given Sunday. There's just not that many churches. Meaning most people aren't doing this. But as a hardcore atheist, I now suddenly want the church to start reaching out to the community and grabbing some of these people and bringing them in, because obviously they need that stress buffering. You need to bring these people back in because they went out there on their own they're not doing good things. They're not making good choices. There's people who need it, I guess.
Well, and I've heard a lot of, I also don't have experiences with this sort of thing, but I've heard a lot of stories, like from my father who went to Catholic school for his entire life, that, you go to a Bible study and you talk about different interpretations and you talk about shades of gray and you talk about all this kind of stuff that, we talk to each other about kind of minutia in opinions and all these sorts of things every day when we talk to each other in person over a beer or in a classroom or whatever it is. And so, yeah, you can totally see how if you're not doing that, if you're living in your echo chamber online as pertains to your religion, it's a lot harder to see those shades of gray.
But yeah, I mean, I've noticed it quite a bit because I used to be very curious to talk to people about their religion. I don't do it anymore. I don't care. I can't. But I was, because I went and read the thing, and I was always just really fascinated how individualized people's interpretation of what was written in there was, and how different it was from what was written in there. And for you to have a belief system that you get to make up, and you share it in common with other people who've also made it up, seems very strange.
Yes.
What's the next story, Kiki? Who's got a story? Who's next?
I've got some stories. I have a couple of stories. I got chills. They're multiplying.
Okay.
What?
Are you losing control?
No, I'm totally in control because I'm going to talk about science right now.
Great.
Hello, everybody. I got this. I'm in control. But what I'm going to talk about is musical chills. When you listen to music, do you ever get that feeling, goosebumps, where you just, the music, there's something that happens and you're like, oh my God, this music is giving me goosebumps.
Music also sometimes makes me cry.
Yes. It's very evocative in that way. Yes. Justin? Chills?
So I can remember when that could happen. It doesn't anymore.
Okay, you don't listen to music anymore. Okay.
No, I listen to music anymore, but I no longer. No, I remember like there were like Pink Floyd songs. I would get like, whoa, these chills. No, I totally know what you're talking about. I haven't had them for several decades.
So that's interesting. That's very interesting, and I wonder what happened, because researchers have been looking into the pleasure-inducing aspects of listening to music for some time, and this particular study used a method called high-density EEG, electroencephalogram, and the high-density EEG is able to reveal patterns of brain activity in the cerebral cortex that have been identified by fMRI or PET scanning. It's very high resolution and is able to, instead of kind of give just general blobs of brain activity or just a certain brain rhythm in the brain overall, it's able to tune in on certain areas of the brain. The reason they looked at it at musical chills with this technique is that they'd like to be able to actually study people having pleasurable music experiences outside of fMRI machines. They'd like to go into people's living rooms. They'd like to go to concerts. They'd like to go places where people listen to music together in groups. Speaking of the connection aspect of things that we were talking about earlier with Marta's book, it really hasn't been possible before because the technology that we've used is so individual in nature. You can only scan one brain at a time with fMRI or PET scanning. You can't stick EEGs you can stick EEGs on a number of people and have them listen to the same music at the same time and see what happens in all of their brains simultaneously. And it's also much more portable, so you can go places. So they, in this, didn't go anywhere. They were in the laboratory for this particular study just to give proof of concept. But what they were aiming to do is really identify the cortical brain regions that become active when people get the chills. And so this research took place in France. They recruited a whole bunch of people at this French university, and they started out with over 100 volunteers, but then for one reason or another, they weren't able to come in. All of them were right-handed. All of them were sensitive to musical reward according to the Barcelona Music Reward Questionnaire. And they had to have a score over 65 on this questionnaire. And so half the people out of their 100 people or so who wanted to be in the study did not make it to that limit. They just didn't, or they weren't right-handed. Because of right-handedness indicates brain use or which hemisphere is dominant of the brain. So they wanted to not have that be an aspect. And so they decided to look at the brain that way. 9 of them did not get enough chill-inducing segments of music. So all the volunteers had to know pieces of music that would give them chills, and had to tell the researchers. And so they had to be able to identify enough of them for the study. A bunch of them didn't call back after their initial request. A few of them, they couldn't make the time for an appointment happen because their schedules are too busy. And one had a haircut that was incompatible with EEG recording, according to the study. So if you would like to be in EEG recording studies, make sure your haircut is appropriate. So they ended up with 23 or so subjects that they used for this study, and they put EEGs on them, and they had them listen to 60 to 90 second extracts of music with their eyes closed in a comfortable chair. And then they were supposed to report their emotional pleasure. They had a response box that they were supposed to report it in. And what they ended up finding is that there were definitely particular areas of the brain that became active in response to music that gave them the chills. There are 2 specific patterns for chills. There's a decreased theta activity in the right central region of the cortex, which could reflect supplementary motor area activation during the chills, and it might be related to rhythmic anticipation processing, according to the researchers. There's also a decreased theta activity in the right temporal region, which they think might be related to musical appreciation, and it might reflect the right superior temporal gyrus getting active. But they did not find prefrontal asymmetry reflecting emotional pleasure, but there were other brain waves that responded to increased emotional awareness. But all that said, there are very specific brain waves that are related to first anticipation of pleasure in the music. Maybe the music, or you can sense the pacing of the music or the chords that are being used. There's some anticipatory aspect of the chills. And then there is the actual dopamine release and enjoyment of the music itself.
I feel like they should have swapped them all, right?
Give them different, give the musical, the music that one person thought was great to somebody else.
Well, because I think, there's music that makes you feel sad, right? And that's usually a minor key. But I would be interested to see if there's something musically in common with something that gives you chills. It might not just be that you really like it, or that it, you have an emotional connection to it. But mechanically, it might be something about the music that's causing it, which in which case you could decouple the dopamine release of a song you like from whatever's giving you the chills physically by taking a chill-inducing song from me and making Justin listen to it. It's really hard to parse out the difference between your brain's response to a song you like and your brain's response to a song that gives you a physiological response.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you decouple that? I don't know. It might be the next step.
if a song gives you dopamine, I guess you like it.
Right. Unless you like getting chills from a song the first time you hear it. And you haven't decided if you like it yet, but you're like, oh, the song gave me chills.
Right. Yeah. I mean, every time I've gotten chills from a song, there's not a particular thing that I could say, oh, this is the G minor chord, or, G major, or, the drums are at, 120 beats per minute. There's nothing that I could put my finger on in that way that I would say is a commonality between any of the songs that have ever given me the chills. So,
I mean, my very unscientific response to that, based on just a quick catalog of the songs I know that give me chills, is that there's usually some sort of swelling in the music. So there's a sudden change in decibels or something, or the fullness of the music. So a sudden swell creates an emotional and physiological response.
Yeah, that sounds very plausible.
Yeah, I think for me it's I need at least 180 beats per minute for it to be even interesting. But
maybe it's just that you've listened to Pink Floyd too many times. There's nothing novel to it anymore. You need new music.
No,
Justin.
I think that there is definitely something to that. There's a song which is a lot of minor chords. Lead Belly. Lead Belly's In the Pines. It has this like sort of a haunting sound, and maybe it's giving. Oh, I'm getting a little bit of chill thinking about the song right now. So it can still work. Jimi Hendrix Machine Gun. That's another one. Oh my God, that one works too. So there are still songs I could think of that are chill-inducing to some extent. So that is possible. I had to look back and pull back some songs I haven't listened to much in the past. But yeah, playing a song for the first, like figuring out a song that you want to play or something, writing a piece of music, that can do it for me. More so, I think, than just listening to songs. Maybe it's just music today. The kids today, they don't know how to make music.
Okay, old man.
All right, Grandpa.
No, I'm not a stone, but there could be a thing to it could be that I need to listen to more old blues records and some more of the old 60s music, like the music that I listened to as a child. Maybe the music that still can do that.
Bring it back. Yeah. Maybe it's the music that you've been listening to.
The music of today. I try to stay current,
Doesn't do it for you. Yeah. Another study in Nature Neuroscience has been using AI machine learning to pick patterns out of the noise of brain activity. Now, the researchers say that by being able to understand certain signal patterns within the noise of all the activity in the brain, that they will be able to determine the signals that indicate certain behaviors, like moving a finger, lifting an arm, blinking eyelids, for example. All these movements, they all have their own brain activity signal. But how do you, if you're blinking and lifting a finger and raising an arm all at the same time, how does a brain computer device that's wanting to help you do these activities, if you are paralyzed, say, how does it decide what out of the noise means finger, eyelid, or arm? So there's a lot going on for multitasking of movements that we take for granted if you are able-bodied, but that people who have limited mobility may be very would be very aided by. Could we get brain-computer interfaces that allow prostheses to work to, maybe be Gundam devices that we walk inside that, are external robots that carry us around, but we have to be able to control them somehow, right? The computers are going to be the interfaces. But the researchers for the first time, it's been a tough road, and the researchers for the first time have created, through machine learning, AI, an algorithm that has been able to uncover neural patterns that were previously missed by other brain decoders. And it's able to advance the decoding of complex brain activity and the development of these interfaces for future use. Additionally, the researchers say that being able to restore lost function, it can also help us investigate basic questions about the brain's functions, just generally. And Blair, because I like thinking of things that might disturb you, I was also thinking that once we have this technology, they could listen to our brains using radar or whatever detectors from outside, and they'll know what you're thinking.
No. No. But doesn't this mean that I could put my head in a jar on a robot body and it would move?
Yep.
So
that's where you're going. Yep.
I'll take that instead. Can I have answer to this study instead?
Yes. I like your optimistic nature. So now that you're going to live to 100 by being optimistic, you will, when you get to the age where your body deteriorates and you can't keep it alive anymore, put your brain in a robot, totally be fine.
Download me. I'm ready.
Yep. I think it'll work. I think it will.
Blairbot 5000 reporting for duty.
And this study, we didn't have any COVID stories today, and I did want to talk about this last week. Big announcement, huge announcement that is great news for everybody, that Pfizer's vaccine, in a small subset of its clinical trial testing, has had 90% effectiveness. So the headlines you may have seen are 90% effective. Vaccine is on its way. And everybody's excited. But I want to put some realism into these expectations, because that's why I'm here, to dash your optimism and to
just ground the conversation.
Let's ground the conversation in a little realities. Like I said, 90% effectiveness in a small subset of the clinical trial data. What that means is that there is a lot more, there are many more people, many more subjects who are still being tested, who will still be tested, who are still being followed. There is a lot of data still to be collected before rollout of this vaccine, approval of the vaccine, and rollout can happen. Also, this was an announcement by press release. This data has not been peer-reviewed. Pfizer has been doing... Pfizer has been doing a great job of, staying out of the politics of things, but at the same time, they are a company and they want their stock prices to go up, and they're interested in their bottom line, and this data has not been fully reviewed by the scientific community. So there's a lot more still to come in that process.
Well, and isn't part of the strategy for the United States to pump money into pharmaceutical companies before their vaccines are approved? So
yes.
Doing this would be helpful to them in getting some money.
Yes, but they already have a deal with the United States for the Operation Warp Drive. However, they have not taken any money for the development of this vaccine.
They've taken no government money. They've pre-sold 300 million doses or whatever to the European Union.
And they have a possible deal for a couple million doses with the United States. So
how do you
It's good news. I'm happy about it. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there that they have a lot to gain by just going hey, it's going really good, you guys.
Yep. That's what I was. It's science by press release. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. The other, there are a few other facets to this to consider. It is very high highly efficient, 90%. That's great. So this is really good news. And people within the vaccine science community are very excited about this, because not only is it a highly effective, that it's giving antibody protection. This is also an mRNA vaccine. It's one of the new players on the field. It's not one of the tried and true vaccine standards that we've had in the past. So that in itself is exciting. It means the target that of the spike protein that basically all the vaccines are aiming at is the right target. And that gives a lot of hope.
It is right now.
Yeah. Other problem with it, though, is it's a 2-dose vaccine, which means that even once it does roll out, they have to produce twice the amount of vaccine of a single-dose vaccine. So not only do they have to double produce the vaccine, they have to get, 2 million doses is only going to vaccinate 1 million people. Of those 1 million people, will all of them get both shots? Will all of them come back at the 3-week time frame to get the booster shot? Will the efficacy work? I mean, how much will it affect things if people aren't getting fully vaccinated with this?
And Carol Ann in the chat room also mentioned this is the thing
temperature.
The temperature, they have to be minus 70 degrees Celsius.
Minus 80 degrees Celsius.
Oh, 80.
Which is minus 79 degrees. You can keep the vaccine cold with dry ice for a short period of time, but that still doesn't make it really easy to distribute to places that don't have freezers or dry ice, super cold freezers, sub-zero freezers, and who don't have dry ice capabilities. What about Africa? I mean, New York City, you can probably get it from a delivery point to multiple pharmacies, multiple doctors in one day. But how's that going to work in rural North Dakota?
Mm-hmm.
This vaccine is a positive stroke because it's this is a plus. This is in the win column, but it is premature, and don't get excited yet. I mean, hopefully by next year, maybe by next summer, maybe. But there is still a lot of time before this vaccine or any other is going to be distributed. So keep on wearing those masks and social distancing, everyone. It's not coming tomorrow. It's going to be some ways off. It's very important to be real about all this. Have grounded conversations, as Blair said. Mm-hmm. Yes. Do you remember my poll from last week?
Yeah. You were
would you support a shutdown?
We have 560 votes. If COVID-19 is spiking in your area, how do you feel about lockdowns to control the spread? As it is spiking everywhere in the United States right now. It is spiking in Europe, where it's a huge deal at the moment, and local areas should be applying slowdowns, lockdowns, depending on the severity of those spikes to control the virus. We have many months to go, but there's exponential growth right now that's kind of scary. 78.2% say I'm for it.
All right, let's do it. That's good enough. I don't care. I don't care what anybody else says. I got a majority. That's a win.
It's a win.
Lock it down.
Speaking of democracy, that's very, very great. There were 14.6% who said, I have many thoughts. That was one result. 5% I'm against it, and 2.1% had other thoughts.
The 14% with many thoughts. Focus. You were asked a simple question. You can choose one of two answers. You can think about all those other thoughts later.
In the responses to this, I learned that Australia has basically, they're going to have an amazing Christmas. They're going to have a wonderful their summer holiday, our winter holiday, because they have been locked down. They took it seriously, and in Victoria, there are 0 cases. They are experiencing the ability of being able to go back out in it and live life normally because they did what it took. And yeah.
Stop. I don't want to hear it.
Literally.
They did what it took.
Literally, all you need to do is stay at home until the milk in your refrigerator is expired, and then we could all go outside again. That's how long it would take. Go to the store, buy milk, put it in the fridge, start the countdown. As soon as it's bad, the world is safe, and we can restart society as it was before. That's all this would take.
Yes. So
good job, Australia.
Good job, Australia. Regional lockdowns have worked. And I do hope moving forward, those of us in the Northern Hemisphere who are going into the winter season, that we can get through this together. But if you voted, thanks for voting. Thanks for sharing your mind. It was very interesting. And yes, Carol Ann, I admittedly understand that a poll on Twitter is not scientific and there are many flaws, but it did turn out quite interesting. And on that note, all right, we've made it to the end of the show. We did it. Thank you for listening. Thank you all for being a part of this community. Thank you. I hope that you learned some things from Marta Zaraska about growing young.
That was very fun.
Yeah. How you can
insightful.
Live to 100. It's a great book. It's a really great book and useful. I like the idea of not having to buy a gadget, but
it's also nice if you hold that up again, that's a pretty thick book, and I feel like we only scratched the surface of the subjects that she's covered in this. So
yeah, but she writes very often in other outlets, as she said, so you can follow her and keep learning with her as she covers all of this stuff. All right, shout outs to Fada. Thank you for your help with social media and show notes. Gord, thank you for manning the chat room. Identity4, thank you for recording the show. And thank you to our Patreon sponsors and the Burroughs Welcome Fund for their generous support of TWIS. Thank you to Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vegard Schefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Scioli, Guillaume, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Maddie Perrin, Gaurav Sharma, Shubru, Sarah Forfar, Darwin Hannon, Donald Mundis, Stephen Albron, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fred S104, Corinne Benton, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Ben Bignell, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Joshua Fury, Shauna Nina Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Melazon, Johnny Gridley, Flying Out, Richard Porter, Christopher Dreyer, Mark Masaros, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Melania is a Russian super spy, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Matt Sutter, Philip Shane, Kirk Larson, Craig Landon, Mountain Sloth, Jim Drapeau, Sarah Chavez, Alex Wilson, John Ratnaswamy, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Stanton, Paul Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, Ben Rothig, Gary S., Tony Steele, Ulysses Adkins, Brian Condren, Jason Roberts, and Dave Friedel. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, you can go to twist.org and click on the Patreon link. It's that easy. On next week's show,
we will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook studio channels, as well as twist.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast? Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. Then you can listen to us on 2 times or 4 times or 17 times. Talk like chipmunks. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twist.org, and you can also sign up for our newsletter.
You're really messing with them now. You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistmania@gmail.com, or Blair, me at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will get spam filtered all the way out to a glowing moon.
Ooh, pretty. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at JacksonFly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes due tonight, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and I think that's our 800th episode.
I forgot about that. I forgot.
And
800, it's coming
again for more great science news and to celebrate 800 episodes of TWIS.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get better internet by then. If you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say, and if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science. This Week in